What if I told you that the most destructive natural phenomenon on the planet was just another ordinary season for an entire people? Imagine winds that uproot centuries-old trees and a wall of water that wipes out everything in its path were not the end of the world for these people, but simply a familiar entry in the calendar. How can one remain calm when the greatest power of nature is bearing down on you? For many years, we studied the tribes of the Great Plains, marveled at the builders of longhouses, and were amazed by the resilience of the gatherers of the subarctic forests, growing accustomed to tales of extreme cold. But this story is about something entirely different. Far to the south, in the very heart of Florida's deadly and impassable swamps, people built their lives under conditions that today would be called a zone of absolute disaster. They lived in constant anticipation of powerful tropical cyclones, turning deadly winds into a routine and an integral part of their annual cycle. How did they manage not just to survive, but to thrive where modern technology fails? Today we will uncover the secrets that the mangrove thickets have hidden for centuries. You'll see the unique engineering solutions of the Florida Seminole, from building special stilt houses to incredible survival tactics in the eye of a massive storm. Watch the video to the end to understand how ancient knowledge helped tame the fury of the ocean. Believe me, after this video, your view of the wild will change forever. Let's begin. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about completely overturns our understanding of how ancient people related to the most powerful and devastating force on the planet. The Florida Seminoles, who inhabited the vast, swampy territories of the southern peninsula, never viewed an approaching tropical storm as a sudden catastrophe or divine punishment. For this incredibly pragmatic people, a powerful hurricane was as natural and inevitable a season as a cold winter on the plains. They learned to coexist with that terrifying natural phenomenon from which modern people prefer to flee immediately to safe distances. This unique people viewed the piercing, howling wind and the approaching massive waves as an integral part of the eternal, natural cycle of renewal of the Florida land. The Seminole culture was entirely devoid of any desire to artificially subdue nature or erect impenetrable walls in the path of massive air masses. They understood perfectly well that any rigid resistance to the incredible pressure of hurricane-force winds would inevitably lead to the complete destruction of even the sturdiest wooden structures. Instead of building massive protective shelters, they relied on incredible flexibility, lightness, and the ability to literally blend into the surrounding swamp landscape. Their compact settlements organically dissolved into the dense vegetation, posing absolutely no challenge to the colossal natural force sweeping in from the ocean. Such an architectural approach required the deepest practical knowledge of the laws governing the movement of wind and water across vast open spaces. The traditional hurricane season on the peninsula lasted several long months and demanded constant, almost instinctive readiness from every resident. The Seminoles structured their entire complex annual rhythm exclusively around the expectation of inevitable strong winds and torrential tropical rains. The corn harvest, the gathering of timber for construction, and preventive repairs to their tall dwellings were always planned with the inevitable arrival of a powerful storm in mind. The daily routine of this vast tribe never came to a complete halt, but rather smoothly transitioned into a new, more sheltered mode of operation. People methodically adapted their customary daily activities to the conditions of constantly rising humidity and winds that grew stronger with each passing day. The specific Florida climate dictated its own strict building codes, requiring constant cross-ventilation of all wooden structures being erected. Dense swamp vegetation and high humidity completely blocked the free movement of fresh air at the very surface of the soft earth. This is precisely why the Seminole intentionally raised the smooth floors of their homes on special tall stilts, creating powerful natural ventilation from below. The empty, ventilated space beneath the wooden flooring ensured that the interior of the house remained dry even during the most severe ocean floods. This ingenious engineering trick allowed them to work and rest comfortably amidst the dense swamp vapors and constant dampness. This southern people's attitude toward accumulated material possessions differed radically from the modern approach we are accustomed to. The sudden loss of their old dwelling during a particularly severe and violent storm was never perceived by them as an irreparable loss. All the necessary natural materials for building a completely new, sturdy house were always found in abundance right at their feet. The complete restoration of a structure destroyed by the wind took only a few days of coordinated collective labor by many adult members of a single large community. The primary, indisputable value was considered to be exclusively the accumulated knowledge of how to properly tie support posts and skillfully weave palm roofs. It would be very interesting to hear your perspective on this unusual perception of destructive natural phenomena. What do you think about this unique ability of people to view a devastating hurricane not as a tragedy, but as part of everyday life? Share your detailed thoughts on this incredible fact in the comments section right below this video. Also, be sure to subscribe to our channel to regularly receive access to new, in-depth historical investigations into the lives of indigenous peoples. Your ongoing support motivates us to uncover even more hidden details from the daily lives of ancient North American civilizations. A secret passed down from generation to generation is hidden in the simple atmospheric changes that precede the powerful onslaught of a tropical storm. The Seminole could unerringly detect the relentless approach of a destructive hurricane long before the strong winds began to bend the branches of tall trees. For hours, they would watch intently for the slightest change in the color of the high sky, which took on a very specific leaden green hue before the storm. Tall, feathery clouds, resembling endless, elongated threads, served as the very first and most reliable warning of a storm brewing over the ocean. These light and transparent bands of cloud moved incredibly quickly across the entire sky, significantly outpacing the main heavy air masses. The adult inhabitants of the settlements paid the closest attention to the physical behavior of the water in the wide bays and countless inland marshes. Several long days before the direct hit of the storm, the level of the dark water began to rise very slowly, but absolutely steadily and surely. This frightening hydrological phenomenon was caused by the hurricane's colossal atmospheric pressure, relentlessly pushing vast masses of ocean water deep into the flat mainland. Familiar coastal landmarks and protruding tree roots gradually disappeared beneath the advancing mass of water in the dense mangrove thickets. The current's speed in the narrow channels changed abruptly, unmistakably signaling to people a global disruption of the region's usual water balance. The direction and general nature of the wind were the most important and accurate natural indicators for long-term weather forecasting. The usual gentle sea breeze was gradually replaced by sharp, cold, and gusty currents of air that carried the pungent smell of seaweed washed ashore. This pre-storm wind did not blow constantly, but swept over the camp in short, yet incredibly strong and dense gusts. Experienced members of the tribe could accurately determine the approximate distance to the center of the approaching storm by measuring the intervals between these powerful gusts. The shorter the lulls between the powerful gusts became, the closer the destructive epicenter of the tropical hurricane was to the settlement. Deep into the night, the main harbinger of a severe hurricane was a very unusual but well-known glow around the moon's disk. A large, luminous ring formed in the sky due to a dense cluster of microscopic ice crystals in the uppermost layers of the tropical atmosphere. The brighter and wider this nocturnal ring became, the more rainwater the cyclone approaching the land carried with it. The familiar stars appeared very dim and heavily blurred through the approaching dense gray veil of high, uniform storm clouds. The boundless night sky completely lost its usual depth, quickly turning into a solid, heavy, and oppressive gray dome over the swamps. The temperature of the humid air just before the strongest storm could rise quite sharply, creating the effect of a giant greenhouse over the forest. An incredibly thick and sticky fog rose from the surface of the warmed marshes, which did not dissipate for a long time, even in very strong winds. The stifling, hot and humid air was evidence of the accumulation of colossal thermal energy in the lower layers of the thickening atmosphere. The massive trees began to secrete much more sticky resin, trying to protect their rough bark from the excessive and destructive humidity. The scent of this incredibly fresh tree resin mingled thickly with the pungent aroma of the vast number of aquatic plants blooming all around. A comprehensive and thoughtful analysis of all these diverse natural signs completely replaced any modern meteorological instruments for the observant Seminoles. They methodically pieced together a complete picture of the approaching tropical storm from the elongated shape of the clouds, the scent of the heavy wind, and the density of the swamp water. Each such observation was invariably confirmed by years of practical experience and discussed in detail at serious councils of adult community members. Errors in these complex natural calculations were virtually impossible, as this multi-level forecasting system had been honed over many centuries. The surrounding nature itself provided them with enough time and obvious clues to prepare in time for the major climatic challenge. This accumulated knowledge allowed people to always stay one vital step ahead of the destructive and blind forces of nature. In the next chapter, you will learn what unique architectural ingenuity they employed to build sturdy houses without a single solid wall. Something you've never seen before, a perfect and incredibly sturdy house that completely lacks the usual exterior walls. The traditional wooden dwelling of the Florida Seminole is known simply as a chiqui, which translated into modern terms simply means a cozy home. This lightweight structure is radically and completely different from the massive longhouses of the Iroquois or the dense leather teepees of the Great Plains Indians. A classic chiqui consists of a perfectly level wooden platform raised high above the damp ground on very sturdy and thick cypress posts. Above this open platform rises a huge, massive roof, skillfully woven from hundreds of dried, broad leaves of a tropical palm tree. The main architectural uniqueness of this chiqui lies in the absolute and complete absence of any solid exterior wooden walls. In the harsh conditions of Florida's incredibly humid climate, solid walls would inevitably lead to the immediate formation of destructive mold and stifling stuffiness. The completely open structure allowed the blowing wind to freely and unimpededly ventilate the dwelling from all four sides around the clock. Such constant and strong circulation of fresh air kept the wooden floors completely dry and maximally extended the service life of the entire structure. At the same time, the incredibly wide overhangs of the massive palm leaf roof very reliably protected the interior of the platform from lashing, sideways tropical downpours. The specific selection of suitable wood for the load-bearing support piles was strictly regulated and based entirely on the people's rich, practical experience. The Seminole used only straight trunks of swamp cypress, which was distinguished by its incredible natural resistance to rapid decay in a warm, humid environment. These thick cypress logs were carefully and meticulously stripped of their rough bark and driven incredibly deep into the soft, pliable swamp soil. These carefully calibrated support posts could stand for many decades in murky, stagnant water, fully retaining their original colossal strength and hardness. It was precisely these posts that always ensured the fundamental, unshakable stability of the entire lightweight wooden structure during the most powerful ocean storms. All fasteners in the classic chiqui completely and categorically excluded the use of any metal nails or staples familiar to us. Wooden beams, long rafters, and load-bearing piles were firmly joined together solely through the use of highly complex systems of joints and lashings. Long, flexible roots of certain plants and narrow, sturdy strips of carefully tanned thick leather were actively used as reliable ropes. During very strong and sudden gusts of wind, such tight joints never snapped in half, but merely flexed slightly under the enormous load. This incredible flexibility allowed the entire tall house to sway smoothly with the wind, absorbing the colossal, destructive kinetic energy of the storm. The interior layout of such a chickee was always extremely minimalist, austere, and strictly governed by functional rules of space saving. High up near the roof, long ropes were stretched taut for drying spare clothing and safely storing light baskets of food supplies. In the very center of the wooden platform, a special open space was often left for a small, constantly smoldering hearth. The acrid smoke from this fire rose unimpeded through small openings near the ridge of the thatched roof. The blazing fire was built exclusively on a very thick layer of sand or clay, which reliably protected the wooden floor from accidental ignition. The traditional construction of a new chickee was always a large-scale collective endeavor, firmly uniting many adults in a single effort. Strong men handled the heavy task of harvesting massive cypress logs in the forest and the precise erection of the building's load-bearing wooden frame. Experienced women took on the incredibly painstaking and time-consuming task of gathering and carefully, tightly laying thousands of palm leaves on the roof. Such organized collective labor made it possible to fully erect a sturdy and reliable house in just a few full days of continuous work. Each new Seminole forest settlement always consisted of a picturesque cluster of these incredibly light, well-designed, and elegant structures. This unique, open architecture boldly challenged all conventional notions of solid walls and reliable protection from the elements. Please like this video if you too were amazed by such incredible engineering ingenuity and the ability of ancient people to harness the laws of physics. Here is what happens behind closed doors just before the arrival of a devastating storm, when the heavens are ready to fully unleash their fury upon the earth. Preparations for the first strike of a massive hurricane began immediately after the first undeniable and alarming atmospheric signs appeared in nature. The Seminoles never succumbed to panic. Their well-rehearsed actions were incredibly precise, calibrated, and honed to the point of automaticity through years of training. Every forest settlement instantly shifted into a special state of maximum alertness, where every adult knew exactly what their specific duties were. The time for fuss was irrevocably lost. The most critical period of methodically securing all property and food supplies was rapidly approaching. The greatest asset of the large community, aside from the wooden dwellings themselves, had always been the long transport canoes hidden in the reeds. These sturdy boats provided vital mobility, and their sudden loss would mean complete isolation amidst the deep, flooded mangrove forests. The heavy wooden canoes were urgently hauled far up onto the high bank and tied incredibly securely to the thickest trunks of old cypress trees. To prevent the howling wind from lifting these boats into the air, they were always turned upside down and pressed tightly against the ground. Sometimes empty canoes were deliberately filled with heavy, smooth stones and wet mud to maximize their weight before the hurricane struck. All of the tribe's food supplies required particularly careful, multi-layered protection from the ever-present water and all-pervading tropical humidity. Dried provisions, hard corn, and edible roots were quickly transferred into incredibly tightly woven baskets made of marsh reeds. These precious, full baskets were hung high under the very ridge of the chica roof, where rising water could not reach them even during a severe flood. Some essential foods were wrapped very tightly in huge, broad leaves and coated with a thick layer of sticky clay to ensure complete airtightness. Such sealed clay cocoons could lie in murky water for weeks on end, keeping the food inside completely dry and edible. In the most protected center of the settlement, they always prepared an incredibly large supply of completely dry firewood to maintain the vital fire after a storm. This firewood was very tightly covered with several layers of broad palm leaves and old, resin-soaked, waterproof leather awnings. Maintaining the ability to start a hot fire incredibly quickly was critically important for subsequently drying wet clothing and preparing hot food. For this same vital purpose, Completely dry plant tinder and sharp flints were always carefully hidden in special airtight tubes. These precious, sealed tubes were constantly carried on their belts by the most experienced and responsible adult members of the Native American tribe. All heavy clothing and thick winter capes made of animal skins were folded as carefully as possible into very tight, dense, and compact rolls. These prepared rolls were packed into special, spacious, waterproof bags, expertly sewn from carefully treated thick hides. A massive storm was crashing down on the coast as a solid, impenetrable wall of incredibly dense rain and a wildly howling, roaring wind. The familiar horizon instantly and completely vanished behind a thick veil of flying gray water, and the sky merged with the raging, churning swamps. Tall, old trees began to bend submissively toward the ground, emitting a very loud crackling sound under the colossal pressure of the heavy air masses. The murky water beneath the chica platforms rose rapidly, turning every dwelling into a tiny wooden island amid a raging freshwater ocean. The longest, darkest, and most incredibly tense part of Florida's annual hurricane season was beginning. The preparations ended in complete silence, unconditionally yielding to the primal power of the howling wind and lashing water. In the next chapter, you will learn exactly how they coped with this terrible weather in reality without leaving their open dwellings. The geographical location of the Seminoles' hidden forest settlements played a key and absolutely decisive role in their survival during the most powerful hurricanes. They never built their light cheekies on the open and completely defenseless sandy beaches of Florida's salty ocean coast. Their compact homes were always very securely hidden deep within the intricate labyrinths of dense mangrove forests and endless freshwater swamps. These amazing mangrove trees formed a unique, incredibly dense buffer zone between the raging ocean and all the inland areas of the peninsula. It was this vast, living green wall that always bore the very first, most powerful, and devastating blow of any tropical storm. Mangrove thickets possess an incredibly complex, branched, and powerful root system that rises high above the constant level of dark water. These endlessly intertwined, sturdy stilt roots always form an incredibly dense network capable of effectively dissipating the colossal energy of onrushing ocean waves. When a terrifying storm surge drove a gigantic mass of water straight from the ocean, the mangrove roots acted as a giant, impenetrable natural filter. The enormous wave passing through this rigid barrier rapidly lost its initial height, speed, and destructive kinetic energy. Only a relatively gentle, though significant, rise in the level of muddy water reached the Native American wooden settlements, without the aggressive, destructive surf. The voluminous canopies of these remarkable trees also served an incredibly important and irreplaceable protective function for the entire peninsula. The dense, tough foliage and incredibly tightly intertwined branches created an incredibly powerful barrier in the direct path of the roaring, hurricane-force winds. The very fact that the settlements were located deep within the center of the flat peninsula significantly reduced the intensity of the passing cyclone. It is well known that massive hurricanes are always fueled by the energy of warm ocean water, and making landfall inevitably and rapidly weakens their structure. Moving slowly over the damp but still solid lands of the Everglades, the terrible storm gradually lost its initial thermal fuel. By the time it reached the remote villages of the reclusive Seminole, the powerful cyclone had often transformed into an ordinary, albeit very strong, lingering storm. The clever Indians masterfully exploited this immutable geographical law of the harsh natural world to their maximum and obvious advantage. The mangrove forests also reliably and firmly held back vast masses of soft soil from total erosion and complete washout into the ocean. Without their incredibly strong soil-anchoring roots, the entire Florida coast could have been completely and irrevocably washed away by giant storm waves. It was these sturdy trees that kept the shoreline stable and unbreakable throughout many long and turbulent centuries. Experienced Seminoles knew for certain that the soft earth beneath their wooden homes would never disappear, even after the fiercest and longest hurricane. This absolute confidence in the incredible stability of the forest soil was the main foundation for the construction of their permanent wooden platforms. The unique ecosystem of the Florida swamps possessed an incredible, astonishing ability to recover very quickly after any storm. Mangrove branches broken by strong winds rotted incredibly quickly in the warm swamp water, generously fertilizing the soil for new green shoots. This centuries-old alliance between the Florida Indians and the dense mangrove forests was an example of an incredible and ideal natural symbiosis. The sturdy trees always provided people with reliable protection, excellent building materials, and a safe place to live in seclusion. In return, the people always treated the forest with incredible care, never cutting it down unless absolutely necessary for survival. They carefully took from nature exactly as much as was needed to sustain their modest lives and repair their dwellings. This incredible harmony allowed them to survive the harshest seasons time and again for many long generations. The hidden truth that everyone keeps silent reveals the astonishing and utterly incomprehensible calm of the people right in the center of the raging storm. When the massive hurricane reached its maximum destructive force, all the Seminoles were already on their high wooden platforms. All around them, the wind raged like a solid wall, snapping thick tree branches with a crash, while murky water rose almost to the floorboards. Yet inside the completely open and drafty chickees, an atmosphere of incredible calm and absolute silent resignation to their fate reigned. The people simply sat in incredibly tight groups, wrapped in heavy skins, and methodically waited for the raging storm to finally subside. None of them ever tried to shout or hopelessly drown out the deafening roar of the howling, icy wind with their own voices. Rare conversations took place only in cases of the utmost necessity, in incredibly short, clear, and abrupt phrases. They conserved their inner strength for a possible emergency move to a safe place, should the water level suddenly rise above the critical mark. Any physical activity during this time was reduced to an absolute minimum, so as not to waste precious and necessary energy. This long, static wait was their unique form of deep meditation and complete unity with the raging, untamed nature. In these most terrifying moments, people relied solely on their incredibly keen hearing to fully monitor the dangerous situation around them. The sudden, loud crack of snapping leather straps or the terrifying sound of a tree breaking nearby served as a signal for immediate, life-saving action. Human hearing was sharpened to an incredible degree, unerringly picking up the slightest changes in the tone of the raging, howling wind. When the very center of the powerful hurricane, known to all as the Eye of the Storm, passed directly over the settlement, a sudden, incredible silence fell. The howling wind died down very abruptly. The heavy, dark sky quickly cleared, and the bright sun might even peek through the torn clouds. The experienced Seminoles knew this incredibly deceptive phenomenon perfectly well and never left their secure shelters. They always used this brief respite only to quickly inspect the fortifications and secure any loose green palm fronds. Everyone understood perfectly well that soon the fierce wind would strike with renewed, incredible force, but this time from the exact opposite direction. The hurricane continued to test the strength of the platforms for many long hours, gradually moving inland. In the next chapter, you will learn how they assessed the devastating consequences of this terrible weather after the calm returned. When the howling wind finally died down and the incredibly heavy gray clouds dispersed, a completely transformed world lay before the Seminoles. Vast swamps had overflowed their banks everywhere, completely turning all the familiar forest trails into incredibly deep and murky water barriers. Absolutely all familiar landmarks along the shore had vanished beneath the thick, muddy water, or were completely hidden beneath gigantic piles of broken branches. The air after the storm became incredibly clear, transparent, fresh, and completely filled with the pungent scent of broken wood and sea salt. The most critical and very long phase of assessing the damage caused by the storm and carefully planning all future restoration work began. The very first task was always an incredibly thorough and lengthy inspection of every tall chiki in the forest settlement for hidden damage. Experienced men carefully checked the perfect verticality of all the cypress piles and the absolute integrity of the supporting wooden platform. Old rope fastenings, severely weakened by constant friction and prolonged exposure to moisture, were examined with incredible care and methodically from all angles. Some complex knots required immediate and very tight retying to permanently prevent the accidental collapse of the heavy roof during the next gust of wind. The upper palm leaves on the enormous roof were often found to be severely disheveled and required urgent and complete partial replacement. The overall level of murky water in the vast swamp after a severe hurricane could remain critically and incredibly high for several long weeks. Huge masses of accumulated rainwater drained very slowly and reluctantly across Florida's flat, table-like landscape back toward the ocean. Moving on foot around the camp became absolutely impossible. Any activity required the mandatory use of wooden transport canoes. People very carefully untied their longboats from tall trees and carefully inspected them for dangerous holes or deep cracks. These boats were thoroughly cleaned of tightly packed mud, old rotten leaves, and small twigs that had become lodged. The most important and labor-intensive task during the massive repairs was the complete replacement of damaged green palm leaves on the high roofs. The howling wind very often mercilessly tore off entire huge sections of the roof, leaving gaping holes in the protective dome of the houses. Large groups of experienced gatherers set out in their canoes to the most remote parts of the forest where undamaged, sturdy sable palms grew. They incredibly carefully cut only the largest, widest, and greenest leaves, carefully leaving the young shoots for the tree's continued growth. Returning to camp, they brought back huge, incredibly heavy bundles of this most valuable natural roofing material for construction. Properly laying brand new leaves always required special skill and precise knowledge of traditional, complex weaving techniques. The enormous leaves were incredibly carefully smoothed out by hand and laid strictly on top of the old layer, completely covering all gaps. In the very center of the level platform, the hearth was carefully rebuilt on an incredibly thick cushion of dry, light-colored sand brought in by canoe. All the wooden utensils and numerous woven baskets immediately took their strictly designated places along the edges of the incredibly spacious dwelling. The huge wooden house once again became the most comfortable and absolutely safe place for rest and daily work for the entire family. The entire lengthy repair process had a distinctly social character, bringing the entire Native American community incredibly close together. Numerous neighbors actively helped one another, moving quickly from one damaged wooden hut to another throughout the day. A very short time after the terrible storm, the huge forest camp looked as if absolutely nothing had happened. The fresh and incredibly green palm leaves on the roofs quickly turned yellow under the scorching rays of the tropical sun, blending in with the old ones. The tribe's life was quickly returning to its usual, incredibly measured rhythm, fully submitting to the eternal and harsh laws of nature. The restored wooden canoes once again stood proudly above the murky waters of the endless swamps, fully prepared to face new climatic challenges. A great deal of hard work lay ahead to adapt to the aquatic forest landscape, which had been completely transformed by the hurricane. The massive hurricane radically and beyond recognition altered the geography of Florida, transforming vast land areas into a continuous freshwater sea. In such incredibly harsh conditions, the traditional wooden canoe remained the only possible and absolutely reliable means of transportation. These long boats, hollowed out from a single massive cypress trunk, were true masterpieces of the Indians' unrivaled shipbuilding. They had a completely flat bottom and an incredibly shallow draft, allowing them to glide easily over the water's surface, barely touching underwater obstacles. The role of wooden canoes during this incredibly difficult post-storm period grew exponentially, becoming the sole guarantee of survival. The lengthy construction of such a massive canoe was an incredibly complex and labor-intensive process, requiring immense patience and skill from the builders. Experienced Seminoles selected the straightest, most massive cypress trunk, felled it, and incredibly slowly burned out the core using controlled fire. The heavily charred inner wood was scraped away with incredible care using sharp shells and special flint scrapers until the sides reached the desired thickness. The finished, enormous boat turned out to be incredibly light, astonishingly sturdy, and completely resistant to the inevitable rot in the damp, marshy environment. Such an incredibly fine, durable canoe served reliably for many decades and was carefully passed down from father to son. After a devastating hurricane, when deep, murky water completely obscured all the old trails, boats became the only means of transportation. Many people moved through the completely flooded forests, using incredibly long and sturdy wooden poles to push off from the bottom. Wooden oars were used exclusively in very deep sections of completely open water, where a long pole could not reach a solid foothold. Steering such a long boat through incredibly dense mangrove thickets required astonishing dexterity and incredibly precise calculation of every physical movement. The enormous canoe glided completely silently and smoothly between the trunks of trees protruding from the water, overcoming absolutely any obstacle. Wooden canoes were constantly used to safely transport the incredibly heavy loads needed to rebuild the entire camp. They were used to very carefully carry brand new thick cypress logs for support piles, huge bundles of palm leaves, and supplies of heavy clay. The carrying capacity of these longboats was simply astonishing, despite their apparent fragility and surprising lightness of movement. Properly balancing the heavy cargo required immense experience to ensure the boat never capsized during a sharp turn in a narrow forest channel. An incredibly well-loaded canoe glided smoothly and very steadily through the water, obeying every movement of the long pole without question. The gathering of vital forest resources in completely flooded areas was carried out exclusively and solely with the help of these long wooden canoes. People moved very slowly through the incredibly dense mangrove thickets, carefully searching for useful materials blown by strong winds onto high branches. From these stable boats, they carefully gathered the juicy fruits of bromeliad plants and edible thick roots protruding high above the water's surface. The sturdy canoe served as an incredibly strong and absolutely stable wooden platform for the daily gathering of these wild plants at great depths. The vast amount of water brought by the hurricane, paradoxically, made access to the high tree canopies and entirely new sources of plant food incredibly easy. The unique skills of masterful canoe handling were honed by every adult member of the tribe throughout their entire long life. A perfect, stunning sense of balance and an incredibly deep understanding of the complex dynamics of water currents became almost unconscious and instinctive for the people. People could stand upright in a narrow boat for an incredibly long time, pushing off strongly with a pole and maintaining absolutely perfect balance on the water. During periods of incredibly severe post-storm flooding, it was precisely these wooden boats that were the main guarantee of survival for the entire large community. Without them, the tribe would have been forever trapped on their high platforms amidst the endless, terrifying, and deep expanse of water. The massive hurricane made the murky water the rightful, undisputed mistress of Florida, and the canoe allowed the Indians to live with it in incredible harmony. The sleek wooden boat was a physical extension of the human being, his primary tool for exploring the flooded, yet incredibly resource-rich, vast world. As long as the strong tribe had sturdy boats, they could easily weather the aftermath of absolutely any tropical storm. Soon, the overall water level began to steadily recede, marking the long-awaited end of yet another incredibly harsh storm season in Florida. Ancient nature was returning, incredibly slowly but surely, to its perfectly ordinary and peaceful green state. For the Native American tribes of the Great Plains, the most crucial and incredibly grueling test of endurance was always the bitterly harsh, snowy winter. They built very warm winter camps, sewed incredibly thick clothing from bison hides, and stockpiled vast quantities of nutritious pemmican. Their complex way of life was entirely dictated by the anticipation of bitter cold and the constant struggle against the piercing, merciless, freezing wind of the prairie. For the Florida Seminole, the long season of devastating tropical hurricanes was an equally pivotal and incredibly important time of year. The incredible destructive power of wind and water completely replaced the severe frosts and heavy snowfalls for them, shaping a completely unique way of life. This wet hurricane season was never a sudden, unpredictable disaster. It always had its own absolutely clear and predictable time frame. Experienced Seminoles knew exactly when storms began to actively form over the ocean, and when the likelihood of them occurring was reduced to a minimum. This incredibly valuable knowledge allowed them to plan their movements, harvest, and construction work in the forest with great skill and precision. During the most dangerous months, they always made sure not to stray far from their hidden wooden camps, which were reliably protected by mangrove forests. The entire life of the community smoothly shifted into a mode of incredibly cautious anticipation and absolute readiness for the powerful onslaught of nature. They never viewed the colossal hurricane as a hostile force, but rather as an incredibly harsh, yet absolutely necessary instrument of renewal. The powerful tropical wind mercilessly uprooted old, rotten trees, instantly clearing a vast space for young and vigorous mangrove growth. Huge storm surges methodically cleared the swamps of the rotting remains of last year's vegetation and brought in fresh sand from the coast. This incredibly vast, cyclical process of colossal destruction and creation was the main foundation for maintaining the ecological balance in Florida. The Native Americans were fully aware of their modest role in this vast natural system and made no attempt whatsoever to resist it. The annual powerful hurricanes methodically shaped the character of the Seminoles, making them incredibly resilient, completely independent, and incredibly resourceful people. The constant need to regularly rebuild their wooden homes fostered an incredible work ethic and an absolute ability to work seamlessly as part of a large team. Life on high wooden platforms amidst deeply flooded forests constantly demanded absolute vigilance and incredible spatial awareness. They mastered the art of deriving immense practical benefit even from the most destructive natural phenomena, skillfully using deep water for rapid movement. This unique people deservedly became the true and absolute masters of Florida's complex, dangerous, and incredibly changeable forest landscape. When the long season of severe storms finally came to an end, the long-awaited time of incredibly peaceful life and abundant harvesting of nature's bounty arrived. The overall water level in the swamps dropped significantly, once again opening up free access to very fertile lands for the safe cultivation of corn and squash. The vast forest quickly filled with edible roots, and the endless waterways provided the entire community with absolutely everything necessary for an incredibly abundant life. A difficult period of long trials was gradually replaced by a period of incredible prosperity, generously rewarding the strong for their endless patience and resilience. The wild nature fully compensated for its incredible and terrifying destruction with the absolutely incredible generosity of Florida's mild climate. The centuries-long history of the Seminoles' incredible coexistence with powerful hurricanes undeniably proves that humans are capable of brilliantly adapting to absolutely any conditions. They never defeated the raging elements, but masterfully learned to live with them in incredibly deep harmony and absolute mutual understanding. Their remarkable method of survival lay not in brute force, but in incredible wisdom mental flexibility, and absolute observance. Unique knowledge, carefully accumulated over many generations, allowed them to always transform an incredibly deadly storm into an entirely ordinary seasonal occurrence. This is an absolutely unique, stunning example of how an ancient culture can completely merge with its surrounding wet environment into a single whole. A massive hurricane was always an incredibly important season for them, not a catastrophe, a test of endurance, not the end of their world. They constantly lived with what we flee from and always found in this incredibly destructive chaos their own special, very austere peace. What unique topics regarding the survival and life of the indigenous peoples of North America would you like to discuss in detail in our upcoming videos? Please share your interesting suggestions in the comments below this episode, and we will definitely take your feedback into account when preparing new content. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss our new, incredibly in-depth dives into the fascinating history of ancient civilizations.